Hey everyone, it's the Nitty Professor. I'm here today with Benny to ask the eternal question: can I live without knitting? So, this is actually a question that I address directly or indirectly in my novels, partly because some of the plot stuff, so I've written 7 volumes, I'm well into volume 8. Some of it goes back to a time when the answer to that question might have been maybe not. Like, seriously, like it was, a survival mechanism, strategy, right? So I thought, hey baby, he's having a bit of a hard day. Couldn't get him to eat this morning, so I gave him his steroid pill early. I think he's grateful. So in any case, yes, there are some historical characters in frame stories in my novel for whom the answer to that question, you're really needy, can I live without knitting, would be maybe not. Like, seriously, maybe not, right? But in any case, so I wrote just a couple of notes here. I was thinking to myself, what benefits do I have? By the way, I really don't want to live without knitting. I really don't. I have other hobbies, but it's important to me. I do it every day. So, protection, clothing, protection against the cold, protection against the elements, even rain, right? Because wool can hold like a third of its bulk in water, so it's great. I've seen, where was it on? I saw a movie, some kind of a show. I remember I was in Stockholm. It wasn't a movie at all. I was in Stockholm. Hey buddy. Looking at the coats they sold in the department stores, and so many of them were made with wool. I was like, I'm so jealous, because to find a wool coat here, like at Kohl's or something, it's not going to happen. You need me? I was going to knit something while I'm talking. I don't know. It might not happen. But in any case, warmth against the cold, right? So I wear this, keeps me warm. Today it's kind of cool. It's rainy, got some cold front moving in, there's some wind. It's kind of not the best weather. And protection against the wind, like the hats that I knit, I think about, like, how much wind is this hat going to have to withstand at what temperature? And I knit it based on that. Now, could I get a store-bought hat? Yeah, I could. It's modern age, so don't have to necessarily assume I won't survive if I don't knit my own hat. However, my own hand knit hat is better than a store-bought one. Same with socks, right? So socks, I knit my own socks. Could I buy socks? I could buy socks, right? But they're not going to fit the same, and they're not going to be as comfortable, and they also are probably going to give me Disney rash. Can I survive if I have Disney rash? I can, but it won't be fun, right? I've done it, and yeah. So, we'll kind of start by saying I wouldn't want to live without knitting, right? So I could, right? I lived for a long time without hand knit socks, and then I discovered the benefits of making my own socks out of actual quality fiber, and they're fairly great. So another area where I get a lot of benefits from knitting is psychological. The opportunity to pursue a meditative activity that it's not only meditative, but it's also constructive. It's also productive. There are a lot of times when what we do is sort of mind numbing. I think about, like, my reports back when both my sons were working at Walmart, and drove them up the wall to think that they would stock all this stuff, back-breaking work, heavy boxes, hauling them all around. And then the next day, all that stuff would be off the shelves, or maybe even moved, and they'd have to do it all over again. It was the myth of Sisyphus just experienced bodily. Moving that rock up the hill and it goes back down. Move it up. It's just the epitome of pointless, torturous labor. And that's a lot of people's jobs. And no shade on those people. Some of those jobs are pretty necessary. Like, if you're picking up trash, is it going to reappear? Yeah, it's going to. But we don't want to necessarily have to be confined to doing that kind of activity. And I think it's fair to say, at least I like to assume, okay, I'm kind of a spiritually inclined person, that we weren't put here by whatever forces in order to be Sisyphus. That there is a greater purpose for us to be here than to do backbreaking work and then eat and then do it again. So the constructive side of knitting is very compelling. Like even this sweater I have on, or I've got a couple of other ones out, just the fact that I can make something that's not only purposeful and that serves me, but it's also beautiful. So it feeds my soul. It feeds my psyche. And that's sort of a key function of knitting, or this one, which I've barely had a chance to wear this one, but that's going to change because guess what? Fall's almost here, and this sweater is going to be a welcome addition to my wardrobe. So that's a really important thing that I get out of this, is making an artifact that I can then enjoy and that helps me to live comfortably, to stay protected, to protect my feet from blisters or Disney rash, or my ears from frostbite, or, keep me from getting sick, right? That's definitely, it's survivally connected. That's a terrible phrase. In any case, it's connected to survival. But it's also connected to mental needs that we have, of staying calm, facing stress. There are always going to be stresses in human life. We're not impervious. We are subject to all kinds of vicissitudes, be it illness or loss or whatever it is. And we need stress release. We need strategies to process anxiety, fear, loss, etc. And knitting is really good for that. It's really, and it's not just, the activity itself, but I believe it's embedded in the materials. And I did a video a little bit ago about why we are so inclined toward soft, furry, fuzzy materials. And it goes back to evolution. It goes back just to the fact that we're mammals, and that, as mammals back, a couple of millions ago or whatever, we were born to mothers that had fur, and that, we had to cling to that mother in order to stay warm, in order to be nourished, in order to be protected, etc. We are still very much attracted to furry objects, woolly artifacts. So as far as the psychological benefits, are there other things that give me some of those same benefits? Yes, there are. In my case, music. And I sort of, for better or worse, I project my love of music onto a number of my characters in my novels. In book 1, for example, jazz comes into play, dance comes into play. And in further volumes, I have people who are performing musicians to sort of channel my interest in that. And also to share, they say, write what you know. I know music, right? I know music, classical and jazz. In fact, by extension, I could credit my younger son for introducing me to metal music, which I also enjoy in smaller doses. It definitely has its place, in a lot of the characters of my book. So music is really important. And I would say, let's just say that music kind of overlaps a little bit with knitting as far as some of the benefits, like the psychological benefits. In fact, I write to music, and sometimes, I spin to music as well. The combination of spinning, and you get that tactile experience of working with the wool, overlapping with the oral experience of listening to really delightful music. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. And I couldn't just sit there and listen to music, right? I've got to do something. So the spinning is just a perfect combination, because I can't just sit still listening to music. I have to be doing something. So music helps, but it's not a replacement. Writing, obviously, that's like my main vocation right now, is writing. I don't know that I could live without writing. And I like knowing that, as far as some of you have told me so far, the writing that I do in the name of surviving mentally also is helpful for you psychologically, that you kind of grasp my vision of, what I'm trying to accomplish as far as the experiences of their characters and the reflection of the human condition that they provide. What else? I mean, there are a lot of hobbies that could maybe, I don't want to say replicate, but at least somewhat replicate the benefits of knitting. I love woodworking, for example, and there's something about wood too that has a similar experience of reward, tactile reward, and I should look that up. I haven't done any woodworking videos, probably because I haven't really been involved in woodworking recently. I'd love to get back into it. But there are other hobbies, and I'm sure you all can name hobbies that you enjoy, that where you work with your hands, that are at least on a par with knitting as far as the benefits that they give. But still, knitting is kind of unique. And there are a lot of other things about knitting that are special. Color, for example. So some of you, maybe you do oil painting, maybe you do watercolor, and you could make a similar video about, could I live without painting with pastels or acrylic or whatever. And I could think of some people who probably wouldn't want to live without that. I suppose, one of the special things about knitting that I really like is when I make this thing, I can wear it. I can't wear an oil painting. I can't wear a watercolor. It would be a challenge, at least. Maybe I could do it temporarily, but it wouldn't protect my body, right? It wouldn't protect my body from wind or cold or rain, that. So it doesn't have that aspect to it. So knitting, crochet, right? Weaving, they all have this similar kind of capacity, and to a degree even sewing, that not only are you creating something, but you are also creating something that you can put on your body and walk around with, and that's just a really cool thing, because there are a lot of hobbies that you can't do that. The thing about woodworking that's kind of nice too is you can plunk that baby down in your house and it could be underneath you or store your things day after day after day and not just hang on a wall. So I like that too. I'd be interested if you, like what other hobbies could you think about that have similar sort of qualities to knitting and crochet, fiber crafting in general, as far as those sorts of, benefits. Quilting, maybe, probably quilting. Quilting is big. I understand. I want to get started quilting. I'll probably do a short soon because I have a quilting project in front of me that I'd like to podcast about. So, but going back to knitting and survival, I could probably survive without knitting. I could probably exist without holding fuzzy stuff in my hand. I could probably move into the next day if I didn't have this, lovely color in front of my eyes that I can enjoy. Psychologically, I almost see knitting as playing a bigger role than as far as the, sheer physiological protection aspect of it, because stress can kill. We know that, right? Stress can kill, and there's a lot of stress going on in the world today. The things that are happening in the political realm are ugly. They're so ugly, and they start infecting us. And we have to withdraw into an alternate space that is hopeful and constructive and warm and positive and compassionate. And it's so difficult. I don't understand why compassion and constructive thinking and care and protection, why can't they play a role in government? They do in some governments, but it just seems like most governments over the course of human history suck at that. When you think about it, most governments we are just really sucky at organizing our societies in a way that actually fosters basic human value. And we really need to do something about that. So those of us, and there are a lot of us, those of us who are suffering psychologically because of this reality, we psychologically, our survival does kind of hinge on something like this, I mean, heck, there are things, hugging, spending time with people, even playing games, doing puzzles together. So there are a lot of things that we can do, and there are alternatives to knitting, but by gosh, I might be able to survive without knitting. I might be able to live without knitting. But if I ask the question this way, if I ask the question, can I live well without knitting? Then I'm going to say probably not. Probably not. I mean, I did it in the past, and I probably had alternatives that worked for me. And there are other alternatives. But as far as like me now personally in this day and age, and what I have like discovered about knitting since I started doing it a few years back, I think I'd be pretty unhappy if I didn't have it. So I count myself lucky that I have this skill, that I learned it, right? It's not hard, it's not easy to learn. It takes some skill, it takes some time, it takes patience. But I'm so glad that I did. Because I can look at my yarn stash and I can feel comforted knowing that I've got all this opportunity, all this potential to engage my hands, my eyes, my mind in the beauty of knitting, the softness, the constructive aspect, that I can create things that I can then wear and enjoy day to day, that make my life nicer, that help me get through the day when there are so many thoughts swirling around that are making my day difficult. So I think that's my bottom line. That's my answer. Could I live without knitting? I could. But could I live well? I don't think so. So with that, I'll invite you to record any thoughts that you have on this topic in the comments. So I would love to hear from you. And I want to thank those of you who subscribe, who like, who comment. It means a lot. I try to respond to most every comment. On occasion I get a comment where I'm like, scratching my head. I'm like, oh, not sure what that is about. But for the grand majority, all the comments I get are just so wonderful. And they warm my heart. And I really appreciate it. And I hope that my videos are uplifting and helpful. And those of you who have started reading my book, I hope the same. And I really appreciate that. So thank you. I'll end here on a note of gratitude, and we'll talk soon. Ciao.